Welcome to the Daily Signals Facebook Live. We're coming to you today from the Heritage Foundation's Robert H. Bruce radio studio here on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. I'm Rob Bluey, editor-in-chief, and we're joined today by a special guest, Congressman Jim Banks, an Indiana Republican, who has some exciting news to share with us about a plan that he's introduced on Capitol Hill this week, which would provide more educational choice for military families. Welcome to the show, Congressman.
It's great to be here.
Well, we're going to jump in and do some questions in just a moment, but I always like to welcome our Facebook Live audience and encourage them to share where they're watching us from today. It's always great to hear where you're coming to us from. So please leave a comment and tell us the city and state. And Congressman, also I want to do a unscientific poll here of the audience, and I just want to ask them if they will indulge me to answer this question. And I'm going to ask you to either hit the share button or the angry face if you believe that military families should have more choice and freedom over their children's education. Please hit that share button right now. If you don't, hit the angry face, and we'll be keeping an eye on how that turns out. Okay, so let's get started here. Before we talk about the legislation, I want to ask. I want our audience to know a little bit more about you because you have a pretty unique story. You're the most recently deployed member of Congress. You've served in Afghanistan. Can you talk about growing up in Indiana and why you decided to join the Navy Reserve?
Well, both of my grandfathers served in the Army. My brother served for 10 years in the Air Force. My story, even related to the military, is fairly unique because it was a little bit later in life when I decided that I needed to get serious about serving in the military. I always had a desperate interest and desire to serve, but I was about 31 years old when I was commissioned as a Navy Reserve officer. At the time, though, I was already a sitting Indiana State Senator, so
right.
It was a juggling act. I was married, and my wife and I had young children at the time, but my desire to serve grew the older I got, but the older I got, the more closer I realized I was to the date when I wasn't eligible anymore, which would have been 35 years old. So I joined the Navy Reserves, was commissioned, was an Indiana State Senator, which is a part-time job. We have sessions the first few months of the year, and I completed my training, which took about 2 years, was recently promoted to a lieutenant junior grade, which is an O2 in the Navy. The Navy is different than the other branches when it comes to the ranks. And it wasn't, it was just shortly after I was promoted to lieutenant junior grade and completed all of my initial training that I got those orders that say you're being deployed to Afghanistan. So when that happened, the most interesting part of the story is that Indiana has a unique state law that says that if you are activated on military orders, if you go on active duty military orders, you can take a leave of absence as an elected official. So I did that, and my wife Amanda was elected to take my place. So she was the Indiana State Senator, the other Senator Banks, for the legislative session. I'm told every day, and have been told every day since, that she did a better job than I did. But with that, we have a unique story of what military families go through. One goes to serve their country abroad. The other one steps up and does things that the other one used to do. And in this case, my wife was she was a single mother of 3 young children at the time, 5, 3, and 1 years old. But she also stepped into my shoes and served as Indiana State Senator, took care of all of the things that spouses have to take care of when their loved one is deployed. And we got a good taste of what military families go through over and over and over again. Even though it was brief for us, there are a lot of military families who do so much more, and we got a taste of what they go through every single day.
So that brings us to the legislation, and I think it explains a little bit about why you've taken this issue on. There are so many times that we hear about stories, just anecdotally, we featured some on the Daily Signal this week, about the difficult choices that military families have to make when they're issued new orders, or they're deployed, or have to move to a new assignment. And in fact, a study by Military Times showed that education does play a big role in that. So what inspired you to propose this plan where essentially you're giving more freedom and choice to families over the children's education?
Well, this is a really good idea in the absence of good ideas on Capitol Hill these days. So it's a substantive proposal that would solve a big problem that military families face over and over and over again. If you think about it, I mean, this is a unique population of people who move from one place to another every 2 to 3 years, from one military base to another with their families in tow. And they go through the same issue over and over again. They get settled into a community, into a home, whether it's on base or off base. Their kids go to school and make friends and have good teachers along the way, and then they're uprooted and moved to another community. So I've heard the personal stories of that story over and over again. I didn't endure this myself, although our family made sacrifices during that brief period of time that I was deployed as a reservist. We didn't move from base to base every 3 years, but on the active duty side, you hear these emotional stories of what families go through, and it makes it very difficult for the families. It's a big sacrifice for the families, and oftentimes, unfortunately, it's the key decision it's the key point that leads a number of military families to get out of the military altogether, because they don't want to go to that next assignment that might mean a subpar educational choice. It might mean a educational situation that might not be as good as the one that they're in currently. I mean, some statistics show that almost half of military families have come to that point where this has almost affected their decision of whether or not to re-enlist or stay in the military, or to get out of the military altogether, because of this key situation that we're talking about today.
So you believe that by offering these education savings accounts, you'll see more military families opting to stay in, and that has a national security consequence as well, because I understand that the costs of training somebody to come in fresh and start new are significantly higher than if you have somebody who's experienced, maybe as a fighter pilot or something else. So talk to me about not only the educational benefits to the children, but also to our national security.
Well, you just made the point for me, but I think if you could break this down into two areas, they're the hard cost, the cost of training tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars goes into over the career of someone in the military to train them, prepare them. That's why the military is structured the way that it is, where you're promoted every few years, and that's why you have assignments and over 2 to 3 years in different places. You're being prepared for something bigger every step of the way, for more leadership, and a lot of money goes into training personnel, military personnel, for each step of the way to prepare them for that next step of leadership. So you have all of that involved, but you also have the soft costs. And that's what I would focus on more, the emotional toll that these situations take on our military personnel, because we don't want our men and women in uniform to be focused solely on making sure that their children are being well educated. We want them to focus on the job of protecting and serving our country. So those soft emotional costs, the emotional toll that these situations that are going on in the lives of family members, it takes away from what we want our military personnel to be focused on. And that's what I saw when I was deployed in Afghanistan. It was very difficult because my wife and my children were at home. Every day it was difficult to focus sometimes on my job because I was focused on what they were going through at home, and that was a sliver of what our military personnel go through every single day to a much larger degree, especially on the active duty side as they're moving from base to base. And we want this to be simple for them. We want them to have the best educational options for their families that can be provided, so that they can focus on what is most important, what's at hand.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up to that, because I'm sure we have military families listening to us right now, and they're asking, what does this mean for me in reality? How would the program work?
Well, the impact aid dollars, at about $1.5 billion is appropriated for this fund every year. The fund was created so that school systems in areas with a military base that doesn't pay property taxes would receive additional funding to subsidize the funding of those local public schools with a military base that's located. But it was created with the military children, students in mind. So the dollars are calculated based on the number of military children that move from that one base to the next, and to subsidize the funding for those children. So rather than think about this, if we can think about this in philosophical terms, I mean, when we pay our property taxes, when we pay our tax dollars, those dollars are going to educate our children. So if you really believe that, then you should also believe that those dollars could go to specifically help support the educational choices of the military children to begin with. So we have some, of course, the critics and the public school systems who receive impact aid dollars. What they're leaving out is that the very minuscule impact that this would have on the public school districts who receive impact aid dollars, those dollars instead would go directly to funding educational choices for the families for the children of military personnel who are moving from base to base. Now, the choice at hand, I mean, 50% of military kids don't have any school choice options. In Indiana, we've passed a robust educational choice program in our state. So while we have that in Indiana, a lot of other states don't provide that. So if a military family was deployed from Indiana to a state that doesn't have school choice options, then that means that they would have to go to the only choice that might be available to them, which might be the public school option. That might not be as good of a choice for them as a private school or homeschooling, et cetera. So this would help provide a education savings account that would help offset some of the costs for that family to choose another choice, which might be a better choice for them.
Well, I encourage our audience to visit dailysignal.com. We have some great content this week featuring some of the personal stories, but also addressing some of the criticism that, as you pointed out, critics have noted, and really the minuscule effect that we think that Heritage Foundation scholars think it'll have ultimately. You know, you talked about your daughters earlier. As the father of 3 daughters, why is this so important to you personally?
Because that's what it's about, and you know, my daughters, we were able to provide them with good choices. They attend a public school now. It's a very good public school. They're getting a good education in second grade, kindergarten, and our youngest goes to preschool. But there's so many military families that I've met along the way. I mean, these are men and women who I've served with in uniform. Now as a congressman, the stories that I hear from constituents and from military families all over the country who could be positively impacted by this. I mean, this is an emotional cause because I know what it could mean in the lives of military family members and what that means ultimately to the national security of our country. To give these families a better educational choice could mean that our readiness is better to go and prepare for keeping our country safe. But I do think it's important also to note that when it comes to military families, this is a unique population. These are men and women in uniform who love our country, who are serving our country, and they love their children. They want their children to have the best education too. That's why statistically, the rate of homeschooling in military families is twice the rate of civilian families. So that tells you that in that alone, that military families are making choices to help their children get the best education that they can from base to base, from community to community. A lot of times, homeschooling is the best option for them because that's what they've chosen along the way. Oftentimes, it's the only other option that they have in the base. It's not something that they would have chosen otherwise, but in that moment, it's the best option for them while they're on their assignment. At that point. But I think that statistic alone tells the story of what this is all about and giving more options to military families to pick the best choice for them. This is an easy, simple solution to allow them to do that.
Well, and I want to ask you finally about the process for actually making it happen. So you introduced the legislation this week. Congressman has a great Wall Street Journal op-ed which outlined the details of it. You had a couple of senators sign on and introduce it in the Senate. So where do we go from here?
I never even know if the senators are paying attention on what they're up to over there, but. A couple of great conservative senators, Tim Scott and Ben Sass, have adopted the cause because they know they both serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee. And in this case, a couple of really good senators have taken an interest. Other senators have taken an interest as well. I know Senator Cruz's office and some other offices have reached out about this cause. At the same time, we've had 36 or 37 House members sign on as either original co-sponsors or co-sponsors the bill. We're just picking up momentum. I had an opportunity to share this piece of legislation with the Republican Study Committee this week, and that brought along a number of other names who signed on as co-sponsors. So we're just getting started, but your Facebook Live audience today can help us tell the story by reaching out to their member of Congress, and we'll keep doing the same thing on Capitol Hill over the weeks to come as well.
Great. Congressman Jim Banks, thanks for joining the Daily Signal.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
We'll be back with more. Thank you, everyone.